Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon and very warm welcome to this 2025 summer conference of ETAF, the European Tax Advisors Federation. It's a real pleasure for me to see so many familiar faces, and it's a true honor to open what promises to be a rich and timely discussion about the future of European tax landscape. My pleasure to welcome all of you, of course, and in particular, Professor Schwab, the president of the Bundessteuerberaterkammer. Dankeschön for being with us today. And it's my pleasure to welcome as well all the participants connected online. We have 2,600 people connected today with us. So it's quite impressive compared to the almost 60 people who are in the room. And they have simultaneous translation, was maybe a reason for being connected. So as you see, ETAF is, let's say, modern, digitalized. We are using the technology for our events. As you may have noticed, decluttering is a word today in Brussels. Decluttering seems to be on everyone's lips this year, and it's not a coincidence. Since the President von der Leyen calls last year to cut red tape for companies by 25%, the European Commission has been conducting an unprecedented review of the EU regulatory framework, including tax legislation, to identify what's outdated, what's overlapping, unclear, or simply just unnecessary. Within the tax domain, which interests us, this effort has started. The Commission is currently evaluating two key directives. The Directive on Administrative Cooperation, DAC, the DAC, and the Anti-Tax Avoidance Directive, the well-known ATAD. These evaluations will form the basis of a tax simplification package likely to be unveiled in early 2026, maybe, we'll see. But keep your ears open as finance ministers across the EU are pressing for a clearer roadmap by this autumn already. It is our understanding that the simplification package is expected to rest on two main pillars: a broad omnibus directive addressing various tax areas, including those now covered by Pillar 2, and we'll come back to that later, and a proposal for a 10th amendment to the DAC to fix certain of its shortcomings. But let's be crystal clear, and here I think all our panelists will agree, simplification is not deregulation. Let's make the difference. Our chosen theme today, decluttering without diluting the EU tax system, is not just a catchy title. It is and should be our guiding principle. We are not calling for a weaker system. We are calling for a smarter one, clear, consistent, balanced, and built for the future. A strong and fair tax system must remain our bedrock. On that fight, tax evasion and harmful practices. And, well, one that fights against tax evasion and harmful practices, but also one that enables rather than obstructs taxpayers and businesses, particularly SMEs. Let's be honest, most taxpayers want to be compliant, but they also deserve laws that clearly define what is owed, under what circumstances, and when. They deserve administrative procedures that are streamlined and proportionate. Today, it's not always the case. EU tax law has grown more and more complex, Rules designed to catch the few non-compliant actors often end up tying the hands of the many who simply wish to do the right thing. Let me put it plainly. Compliance should not be an endurance sport. The EU cannot continue layering rule upon rule, document upon document, without asking whether the compliance costs, particularly for small businesses, are truly justified. Everyone has its own wish list, member states, European Parliament, stakeholders across the board, and so do we. And we see this conference as an opportunity to deepen the reflection and contribute constructively to the debate. There are some obvious simplification candidates. Overlapping CFC rules now covered by Pillar 2, DAC 6 hallmarks and reporting overload, double reporting issues under DAC 4 and the Public CBCR Directive. And what about indirect taxation? VAT rules could use some streamlining too. But simplification should not be just about cutting our laws. It should be also about building better. Harmonization, when done right, is a powerful tool for simplification. A fine-tuned and more aligned with Pillar 2 Business in Europe framework for income taxation, the BEFIT, proposal, or the recently announced 28th legal regime for innovative companies, including some tax harmonization, could have great potential in this regard. But again, design matters. And so those dialogue with stakeholders to understand the full impact and to take the right measures of the consequences. And let's not forget the tools of tomorrow. Artificial intelligence and digital technologies could play a key role in automating reporting and reducing red tape. So, what we can expect from today's conference. We designed a program that blends high-level political insight with a concrete case study. Our first panel will explore the big picture. What do we mean exactly by decluttering? This new word. What is the political appetite for it? And which tax areas should be simplified in priority? Our second panel will take a deep dive into the Directive on Administrative Cooperation, the DAC, often cited as the most complex area of EU tax law. So, can this be the case study in simplification? What lessons can we learn from its implementation? We are fortunate to be joined today by a fantastic lineup of speakers, EU policymakers, experts, and tax advisors, and I thank them, all of you, very much. Thank you for being with us. Now, I'm pleased to invite the first panel to the stage and leave the floor to our moderator, Saim Saed from Bloomberg Tax. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'd just like to invite my fellow panelists on the stage. We have Maria Elena Scopio, who's the Director for Indirect Taxation and Tax Administration at DG Taxud. We have Michalis Hadjipantela, who is the rapporteur for the draft report on simplification in Parliament. We have Johan Langerock, who represents the Greens in Parliament. Unfortunately, Kira Marie Peter Hansen couldn't make it today. And then we have Christian Boca, who is a certified public accountant and tax advisor and president of the Tax Advisor Association of Lower Saxony and Saxony-Anhalt. Welcome, everyone. There we go. So I'd like to dive in straight away. We have a couple of legislative initiatives which are still a bit further away, but I think the evaluation process is well underway. So my first question, Maria Elena, is through this evaluation process, Philippe mentioned ETAD and DAC evaluations, but I understand that pretty much every bit of tax legislation which is currently present is being looked at. What have you learned during this evaluation and feedback session so far?
Yes, good afternoon, and thanks a lot for the invitation. It's always a pleasure to be present at these events. And thank you very much for your question. Now, indeed, the simplification analysis has been involving all areas of EU legislation. And for what concerns us, we have started internally not only looking at direct taxation, as you all know, and as you will develop in the further sessions, but also in indirect taxation and on the other topic for which I am responsible, which is the carbon border adjustment mechanism. The process of having direct engagement with the industry so far has only been concretely done for CBAM, because we came already with legislation which is actually going probably to be adopted shortly by the co-legislators. So that was very much advanced, and it was part of the first omnibus initiative that took place earlier this year. For the rest, we are analyzing, as I said, very much. And for what concerns specifically my field of interest, which is indirect taxation, we have been doing so across the board. So for what concerns VAT, a big facilitation has already been achieved with VIDA, with the VAT in the digital age, where we have completed even more the concept of one-stop shop that allows every taxpayer to do all his compliance and all operations in the state of his establishment, but of his choice. Now what's left outside are import and exports and intra-community sales and acquisitions of goods when done B2B. But this is not only referring to VIDA, what we are doing. We are looking at beyond the VIDA panorama, and this will be the topic of a study that we are going to start in order to really analyze every aspect of the VAT legislation that has not been looked at yet, in order to check whether additional simplifications would be possible. But this is going to be probably for midterm, because we just arrived with VIDA, so we are now concentrating more on the implementation of what we have already agreed. For excise duties, there is a lot to do. It's true that there is no one-stop shop, no B2C, so in theory everyone has to have a fiscal representative or establish in another member states when there is a willingness to sell beyond the borders. And there is a bit more difficult because, as you know, excisable goods are also controversial goods. They are alcoholic beverages, tobacco products, and energy products. But the energy side is more linked to the Energy Tax Directive, which is a different topic. So alcohol and tobacco. Still, we consider that instead of having the consumers going back and forth with stuff in their cars, that is also a bit obscure how to calculate at the borders in terms of legitimacy. It would be maybe easier to have it in the light to fight fraud by giving the possibility to use a one-stop shop mechanism also for excise duties. So we are exchanging with the industry, with certain member states, particularly the ones that are more interested in this. And we will try to see whether there is appetite for an initiative that could be of legislative nature. Finally, for administrative cooperation, you know that we have a system which is called CESOP, which registers all the payment that are processed through the payment service providers. And according to the rules that are in the legislation on CSOP, these payment service providers are obliged to report all the information to their home state, but also to the state to which the transaction relates to. And this is a double burden, in fact, that we are thinking to eliminate. We would like to make sure that there is a possibility, similarly always to one-stop shop, for this specific part of the industry to be able to fulfill all the obligations that they are subject to further to CSOP application in the state where they are established only, who will then communicate to the other states that are interested in that. So as you can see, in all indirect taxation, there is this basic principle of trying to do it at home, basically, not to have to engage with other languages, with other administrations, with other member states, with unknown rules and system. And we believe that facilitating is the first tool to fight to fight fraud, to fight avoidance, because when you make it easier to pay the taxes, it's much easier not to avoid them. Voilà.
Thank you. Michalis, can you tell us more about this report that you're working on? What is the report seeking to accomplish?
Yes, thank you for the invitation. Thanks all for being here. Which we have just came from a meeting with my colleagues of all parties about the simplification of the tax system, where we are negotiating to find a common report so that it can go to the Econ Committee and voted, and then to the Parliament. As you can all, my profession, I'm a qualified chartered accountant from the Institute of Chartered Accountants in England and Wales. So I'm a person, I consider as a person of the industry. So I understand what is the industry demanding. But on the other hand, when we are in the meeting and we have 9 political parties, we have to appreciate that there is different views, different points, different angles. And I have here my colleague that was representing of my colleagues here, that we had a very interesting discussion. But it shows that if there is a will, there is a common understanding, we can find solutions, irrespective of the fact that in the same room we have the extreme left and the extreme right. So in the report, the basic points of the report is we'll try to simplify the tax system of Europe as much as possible. This is one of our targets. If we have to see whether DAC 6 is working or not, you will see it in the next session. It's something that we have to see it, because as a professional, I fully comprehend how the industry is affected, especially SMEs, that they don't have the capacity, but as well they don't have sometimes the resources. But another thing that, since I'm talking about DAC 6, all this information that we are gathering, that all of us as a taxpayers or as companies we are giving to the authorities, does anyone do something about them? This is something we want to mention and something we want to make clear. Or we are giving information and they are left in a server or in a room and no one is taking care of them, and we just have this waste of money. If this is the case, then there is no meaning of gathering all this information. So it's up to the Commission. This answer to be, it's a question that the Commission has to address, that what are we doing with all this information? How this information improve tax avoidance? Because one of the reasons of the report is we want to tackle tax avoidance if it's possible. So have we tackled tax avoidance? Have we increased our revenues because of all these new regulations? Another thing that in the report that we are trying to find a way is there is different views whether we should have a digital taxation or not. This is something we haven't decided yet. It's something we have to agree in the next 2 to 3 weeks. So this is something that is really pending, and we have to find a compromise about this. Another thing that we have different views is about Pillar 2. There is a strong view from my party, the EPP, that Pillar 2, okay, we have to assess it in the future, not now, to see if it's working and if we need to do any modifications. Because as you can understand now, with the environment in the US, things, they change rapidly. So this is something that my party and some other parties would like to be able to assess in the future. On the other hand, there is some parties that they are very skeptical about touching the way Pillar 2 is working. So again, this is something that we need to find a compromise. To give you a summary of what we are expecting to have a report that will try to simplify things. We are trying to have a report that it will help competitiveness, tackle tax avoidance, and in addition to this, there is again a disagreement, but a strong opinion that tax incentives should be given to disadvantaged areas of member states to help boost these areas. So this is something as well that we have to find a compromise on these broader issues. The other issues, in most of them until now, we managed to have an agreement on them. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Johan, what's the Green position on the report and then on the Commission's decluttering efforts in general?
It works like this? Yeah, perfect. Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, thank you to ETAF for inviting us as Greens here, and I want to apologize on behalf of MEP Kira Peter Hansen as she couldn't be here today. But I'm the group advisor for the Greens, so I will be here today to explain to you our group's views on taxation, especially on this important agenda of decluttering. MEP Haji Pantela already very well outlined the different issues we were discussing in the report, and one has to say the negotiations are also running smoothly in a way that the rapporteur very well succeeds in bringing all of the different groups together behind a few core principles which we all defend. I think all the political groups agree that we need to simplify the tax system, and where we start to disagree then is what do we mean by simplification, of course. And allow me to then explain very shortly how my political group sees it is, to put it very bluntly and shortly, is that simplification does not mean deregulation. And here for us, the tax acquis in the European Union is rather limited. Except for VAT and DAC, the tax acquis is rather limited. So our view is that, just like Letta and Draghi have also highlighted in their reports, is that we need more Europe and not less Europe. We need more harmonization and not less harmonization. So I think this is really the core principle of my group that is then expressed through various positions that it takes on several issues. Of course, we also hear stakeholders, and we have to say, and also me personally, I have to say sometimes to be annoyed with certain stakeholders that come to us and say that the fight against tax avoidance has gone too far, and that there have been too many regulations and directives and rules put in place over the past couple of years, and this now has to stop. And we basically need to take a step back. But the reality is quite different. I was quite shocked when I saw a European Tax Observatory report, the most recent one, I believe, that was published. They analyzed corporate tax reforms conducted in the European Union. And between 2014 and 2022, there were over 295 reforms. So I'm very sorry for that. I'm very sorry for that. But 60% of these reforms were to lower corporate income taxes. So I don't want to create this image that all of the tax reforms that have been happening over the past couple of years are there to complicate life of businesses. Many of them, actually majority of them, have actually been there to lower corporate income taxation. And this is also worth highlighting. And I want to say this, also linking this to an important principle for the Greens, which is Europe and our society is facing major challenges. The transition, demographic changes, security risks, and we need funding. We need money. Inequalities are increasing. So we will never allow, as political group, that simplification means deregulation. That simplification is another word for a new race to the bottom to be organized in corporate income taxation. This is what we fully oppose and what we as a group will never allow. What you can find in the Greens is a true ally in simplifying tax systems. That's also why we are more skeptical on tax incentives, because tax incentives in the end do distort the tax system as it exists. We want a simple, easy tax system that is easy to apply. Everyone pays their fair share, and there's a level playing field and trust between taxpayers and tax administrations. Thank you.
Thanks, Johan. Christian, this has already come up even in the first round. Where do you draw the line between decluttering and diluting? And to just push that a bit, do we need a line maybe the Commission could do with some diluting as well?
Yes. First, I have to say that I feel honored to be part in this discussion, and many thanks for organizing this conference to ETAF and to caring for us, Saim, in this panel. Thank you very much. I really like the name of this conference, Decluttering Tax Law. It sounds somehow like tidying up with Marie Kondo a little bit and putting all the stuff you collected for years in the middle of the room and then deciding what stays and what leaves. This is, for me, the picture of decluttering. And as the vice president of the German tax advisors and partner of a medium tax advisor firm, I see every day how complex tax rules are, especially in Germany. And it would help us to tie up time, resources, and innovative strengths, and also for the tax advisors, but also for our clients. Especially SMEs don't have the capacities to handle this complex regulations or complex tax laws, and it would be helpful for the SMEs to find a better way to get through this. And as you both mentioned a lot of word tax avoidance. Here's a little example from Germany. We had a problem with capital income, taxation of capital income years ago, and they changed rules for a flat tax on capital income about 15 years ago, I suppose. It was 25%, and it was really easy because you had this capital income, it was 25%, even if it's interest, dividends, or capital gains, and tax is collected by the finance world, and no one had to struggle with this. Now, 15 years later, on the way, after having these rules getting in charge, the politicians had the fear of tax avoidance, and okay, it might be a little too easy, and we have to make regulations to the taxation of capital income. And now, today, it's one of the most complicated income and taxation in Germany. Just last week, we had a file from the finance minister about 120 pages, new problems about taxation on capital income. And this is somehow the development which is very easy to see because, of course, politicians have fear of tax avoidance, which is normal, but I think you should ask what would you accept and what is the price for fighting against the avoidance. And tax avoidance is of course not really helpful for all the taxpayers because everyone wants to pay have the feeling that he pays the right taxes. So what do we need from a practical perspective? We would like simplification and not more bureaucracy. The multitude of reporting requirements from DAX 6 to ETAF and Pillar 2 leads to redundant processes. We call for clear prioritization and the abolition of overlapping regulations. Also, we should ask ourselves what the real benefit is in the company's reporting packages. For example, the notes to the annual report, which is a struggle for the SMEs. New obligations without a clear benefit analysis. If you have new reporting obligations, it should only be introduced if benefits are clearly demonstrated. This would be helpful for also SMEs and also for private taxpayers to understand what there's going on. Flexibility in time of crisis. We had just the COVID pandemic, and it would be helpful when we do not have the rigid deadlines for annual financial statements and tax reports, and make sense of use of technology. I think use of AI and digital tools can help automate processes, reduce errors, and conserve resources. Of course, data protection and data security must be guaranteed. But also, one thing is important to me, in the field of digitalization and the use of artificial intelligence must not be a license for even more bureaucracy. Yeah, we should not have the mindset, okay, we leave it just as it is and artificial intelligence will manage it. In Germany, we see every day how tax law is becoming more complex and confusing with every new regulation, despite all the digitalization. We have a lot of digitalization, not maybe in all kinds of the in all fields, but in a lot of fields, and it's impossible today to imagine doing all the work like we did 20 years ago. It's not possible, and we should not count on more digitalization to manage this complexity. It should be reduced. Coming back to at the end to the beginning of my statement, and I like to encourage and also to remind all politicians and stakeholders to the Marie Kondo picture, which I really like. For example, our new government, what we now have a few months now, is coming up with new depreciation, the super depreciation, they call it. And of course, it is more interesting for a politician to get publicity for such an interesting item. Of course, I can completely understand this, but as usual, they did not tidy up old regulations to reduce complexity. It's an add-on on top. It's so far from what I understand. Only if we have the courage to throw off the ballast now can tax law in Europe become efficient, comprehensible, and business-friendly. Thank you very much.
To just continue the Marie Kondo conversation, tax is sparking joy with me. So, Maria-Elena, your colleague Bert Zoudendorp spoke a few weeks ago and talked about how in this decluttering effort, all options are on the table. So my question is, what options are you considering? And to just piggyback off of what Christian said, are digital tools and AI a part of those options when it comes to this decluttering effort?
First of all, I would like to make maybe a terminological precision and also a substantial one, because I know very well Marie Kondo, and her idea is to throw things. As it was said in the beginning, we tend to simplify, but not to deregulate. So when there are overlaps, indeed, it's possible to eliminate certain pieces of legislation, but that is quite exceptional. The wider objective of what goes on in the Commission is to try to simplify, so to make it easier, but not to eliminate what we already have. Because you would soon realize that without certain pieces of legislation, you would only have chaos, and you would not be better off. So apart from this terminological precision, I think that everything has to be used, and anything is going to be used. We are using now the tools of AI also in our daily work more and more. But AI has a double-edged sword. It's a double-edged sword because you cannot rely too much on automated solutions if you don't oversee the process and you don't also look at unwanted consequences. But this is just the beginning of the journey, and what has started as a mapping will surely develop over the months, over the year. This is a journey that has to get to the end of the mandate. This was really an engagement of President von der Leyen from the beginning. It will flourish and develop all along. So as long as we are going to have other tools on top of what is already envisaged, and I believe that one of the most powerful tools is to have the direct contact with the operators, because only they know what is a pain for them to do and what they consider silly, or they do twice or thrice, or they consider not worth the effort. That is already a very important element, but whatever we can add to that, we will do. And even on the process, the input of the stakeholders is useful. If there is any input on how to manage this journey, these inputs will always be valued. But indeed, this is at 360 degrees, but in all directions.
Michalis, you've received a lot of amendments on this report, and you referred to the robust discussions that are taking place in the committee right now. How do you explain this interest? And can you tell us a little bit about what those issues are where there is disagreement, and those issues where there isn't?
Let's start with the positives. There is no disagreement when there is an amendment about competitiveness. There is no disagreement when there is simplification. Tax avoidance, we are all on the same page. But as I said before, there is a disagreement. We have to decide about what will be our proposal if there is any digital taxation, if any, because this is an issue that we need to agree. We need to agree again if there is about Pillar 2, if in the future we need to reassess it. And the next issue is about whether we, through tax subsidies, give incentives to disadvantageous areas of the European Union. We are talking about, we know that all countries, they have some areas that they're disadvantaged one or another way. So there is a suggestion that the incentive can be a tool to help those areas. So these are the basically three main issues that we need to find a common approach in the report, and we have to find a majority on those issues by all parties.
Thanks. Johan, can you tell us a little bit about the Green amendments, for example, on the report and what those positions are?
Yes, I'm sure we will find an agreement. So that's, yeah. There are amendments. We're going into direction that I've been also stating in my initial statement. So calling for harmonization of tax laws is an important one. And secondly, is we've submitted a lot of amendments related to tax incentives. And the tax incentives debate is always a very interesting one where somehow evidence is not always linked with policy making. A lot of incentives are often seen as ineffective, distortive for the market, also distortive for your tax system. And somehow we feel as Greens that we need more involvement of the European Commission in steering all of these tax incentives in Europe. Also because as Europe, nowadays, we want to have a more Europeanized industrial policy. For a more Europeanized industrial policy, we have the Clean Industrial Deal. We have a state aid framework that goes along with this Clean Industrial Deal. But somehow, tax incentives are forgotten. But a lot of member states actually conduct their industrial policy through tax incentives. So if we don't manage to somehow coordinate or streamline all of these various tax incentives throughout the member states, we will not have a coherent industrial policy in the European Union, or at least an industrial policy that could make sense. So in that sense, it's not that we know the perfect answer as Greens, but what we put forward in our amendments is this idea that the Commission should be more involved, could potentially create a framework with criteria, with things to look at for member states when designing their tax incentives. What we also want is to responsibilize member states on their tax expenditures. We are often very critical on member states on their public finances for various legitimate reasons. But here again, tax expenditures are often forgotten. And I think here some discipline could be very welcomed. Something else that we've been advocating in the report as well, and this is actually not our idea, it's an idea that was launched by a group of academics, is the idea of a European tax agency. And of course, some might say another agency, please, no. But let me take the example of the AML authority that we've created through legislation in the past mandate. At some point, member states themselves say we need more guidelines, we need more streamlining, we need a more common interpretation of the rules. And here, an agency or something else, we are open to what it should be, could help in bringing together the various positions of the member states in order to simplify the application of the rules for businesses.
Kristen, I just want to go back to Maria Elena's comments and yours earlier as well on that difference between decluttering and deregulation and the stuff that is gotten rid of versus the stuff that could be simplified. Is there stuff that you think could be gotten rid of, and what specifically are the things that could be simplified? Because it is possible that, and I think this is ETAF's position as well, like DAC 6, for example, should be gotten rid of. And I'm sure Elodie will have a much longer conversation on that later. But the question being that, like, are there things that can simply be thrown in the bin, you think, from your perspective, that don't add any value when it comes to existing tax legislation? Or what specifically are the things that could be simplified?
Yes, first I would like to say something to Maria's words, because I would like to be understood right. Of course, simplifying text does not mean we don't want to have any regulations. We are quite sure that we need regulations, but this regulation should develop in some kind of useful way, and they should be. It should be necessary to handle them. Like you mentioned, the OSS, the one-stop shop system, which is very good and which helps especially small companies, SMEs, to have international trade, which was nearly not possible for them when they do not want to break the tax rules and like paying all tax in Germany, but they have to pay tax in France and Austria and so on. And this was able with about the OSS, which has been very good. And of course, this was a simplification because we get rid of tax rules that doesn't fit in the system of delivery and e-commerce, distant trade, and so on. And this is what I mean. It should be a useful development and not anytime an add-on on the tax system. And you have to cut off things and had to get loose of things that are not useful anymore. This would I like to explain to be understood right. And yes, to come to the to the direct tax field, we still have the struggle. For example, with payroll tax, when you send employees to another country here in Europe, you have to fulfill, of course, the local tax rules, and it's very complicated to be compliant. And this is a very it's a pity because I think most or nearly all of the European companies, especially the small ones, want to be compliant, but it is often not possible to have this to deliver this compliance to the tax departments because they have to fulfill tax rules in other countries. And in other cases, when this payroll system develops, they sometime have a branch, or they have then a subsidiary, and they have to care for pricing, group pricing, and this is for especially also for small companies very complicated to have a compliance setting which is accepted by the finance department. And so I think this would be, when you're speaking of a European tax agency, would be a real benefit when you have the international business for small companies in mind, and helping them to improve their international trade and services. Also, services are very complicated to handle, and yeah, this is what I would like to mention here.
I mean, it's interesting just based on that, because in some instances it sounds as if more guidance, more legislation could simplify, and in other instances it sounds as if more legislation does the opposite of simplifying. And so based on that, Marilena, my question then is, how is the Commission going about trying to make sure that there are rules where they are required and there are fewer where they are not, and all the while ensuring that issues like tax avoidance, for example, isn't worsened through that process?
Well, this is the challenge, to square the circle, because it's true that if you want to clamp down on tax avoidance, tax evasion. In the past, you had to report more, regulate more, check more. But in the meantime, we had some technological advancement. So today, it's possible to have both simplification and fight against tax fraud. And I'm thinking of VIDA, for instance, where you have e-invoicing and the basis to have a future real-time reporting. That means that invoicing is easier, because it is easier. I have first-hand examples from the country I know the best, where my sister, who is a small entrepreneur, she does her declarations under the umbrella on the beach with her phone, because she just uses e-invoicing and compiles the declaration by herself. Still, everything is checked, because that goes through a very precise collection of the data. And in the future, it will be possible to cross-check the data with countries without having burdensome processes of exchanges of information. You're going to do it as it happens immediately, thanks to the technological development. So this is something we didn't have before. There will be many things that we don't have today and that we will maybe have in the next years. I'm thinking of AI, for instance, which is still not widely used, but whose potential can be explored. So I think that's the direction to go, to make sure that we can make it simple, but yet effective.
Michalis, you mentioned these discussions you're having in Parliament. Is there a shift, you think, between the political priorities, say, from even 5 years ago and now, where so much of the legislative effort from the EU in general seemed to be focused on tax avoidance, and now because of competitiveness, there's been a bit of a pivot. And so my question is, within your party and say you personally, do you think, how would you balance, say, making sure that tax avoidance is still something that the legislative machinery, so to speak, is working to limit, whereas making sure that the EU, national governments, yourself are still working to boost competitiveness? And do you think that there's an either or in that situation?
The difference between 5 years ago and now is that 5 years ago we had a lot of growth. Most of the countries, they were running surpluses on their budgets, and they had to start thinking of how to save the environment. By implementing policies for the environment, we've done the Green Deal, Green Transition. We invested a lot of money for the environment. I'm not complaining about that. I'm in favor of the environment. I know what is happening, and we are doing the right thing. The thing is, without realizing it, we had the crisis of the pandemic. And then the Commission decided to push another 800 billion to the world economy for the resilience fund. And this, without wanting it, we boosted the inflation to the skies. And then we started the rollover effects of the high interest rates. And higher interest rates, meaning the households, they have less income for the house, for the home, because they pay a lot of money for the loans. And now we have realized now that Europe is not competitive compared with other parts of the world. And we realize that on the statistics that we see every day. Statistics and figures, they always say the truth. So since I'm almost 1 year member of Parliament, this is my first term, the work that I'm hearing most of the time is in the Parliament is competitiveness. But so now there is a shift on competitiveness. for sure. There is a shift because we that we represent our people, we feel the pressure. They are telling you, I want to register a product in Europe, it takes me 3 years. I want to register in the US, 3 months. So we feel the pressure, we know. And the same with my colleagues. So there is a huge pressure to make Europe more competitive. So there is a lot of thoughts in the agenda how to make this work. And I think it's one-way road for Europe to be more competitive. If we don't find the way, then we will be falling behind, and then no one knows where we'll end up. So to answer your question there is a shift for competitiveness now. We are trying to do it, but to be honest, I was expecting a lot more action and a lot more actions to have the competitiveness and less words, especially from the Commission and from the Parliament. Not just say we want competitiveness, but we have to prove it with action. And sometimes our national interests, they come first than competitiveness. So if we really want to have competitiveness, we have to think that this is the way. And if now our national interests, they don't go the same direction with competitiveness, we have to go with competitiveness. Otherwise, we'll fall behind. So we try to have in the report the competitiveness in mind. Whatever amendments they are for competitiveness, we approve them, all the parties. And hopefully, with the report as well, we can simplify the system, the tax system, and as well, we can boost competitiveness as well.
So just to follow up though, do you think that means fighting tax avoidance should also then take a backseat to competitiveness?
No, I don't know. Tax avoidance, you should be always on the first row. But during the last 4 or 5 months with my role as a rapporteur, I saw business communities of all over Europe. Sometimes we give too much attention to people avoiding taxes, and sometimes we don't give the attention and we don't support the people that they pay the taxes. And one of them, this is something that it's for a discussion for all of you, just to have maybe a future discussion what we do. There was one group of business people that came to my office and said to me, listen, you are saying all the time tax avoidance, but these people, whatever you do, they will avoid in taxes. So give some emphasis to us that we pay the taxes, we pay the salaries of the people, support us, and maybe don't try it, because by amending the regulations to avoid, to tackle tax avoidance, the people that they pay the taxes, they are punished as well. This is the message that was done. I don't have the answer on this, so maybe another seminar we can discuss it together and try to find the right answer for this question that I had. Thank you.
I'm sure Johan has the answer. So I think just to distill it, I'm just wondering about your opinion when it comes to where tax avoidance used to be on the agenda and where it is now, and whether you think that there are any kinds of potential conflicts, so to speak, when it comes to the simplification agenda.
Well, it's hard to answer the question now because we're still waiting for the Commission's evaluation of the Anti-Tax Avoidance Directive and potentially also their proposal in 2026 on how to revise that directive. So, I mean, I think we can fairly assume that there will be some kind of revision of the directive. And I think at that moment we will know for sure whether simplification means truly simplification or whether it means deregulation. I think in the Parliament we had an interesting hearing a few weeks ago where we invited quite some experts to discuss how the Anti-Tax Avoidance Directive should be revised, and if it should be revised at all. And I think actually the experts quite interestingly agreed that there are simplification opportunities in the Anti-Tax Avoidance Directive, but it's not the way that business associations present them mostly. Because what we hear from time to time is CFC rules no more needed because we have Pillar 2. But the experts disagreed with this. They said, well, the Anti-Tax Avoidance Directive provides 2 models for CFC rules. Let's just focus on one model and let's disregard the other model. Let's make sure that member states apply the CFC rules in a similar manner so that businesses know to which CFC rule they need to respect. But let's not cut CFC rules altogether. Also because the scope of the Anti-Tax Avoidance Directive and Pillar 2 is very different. Anti-Tax Avoidance Directive applies to everyone, including SMEs, whereas Pillar 2 only as of 750 million annually. And the same goes for the interest limitation rules. The interest limitation rules still provide for many options and a leeway for member states to interpret it the way they want. Here again, the directive could be more restrained and telling member states, we want you to apply the interest limitation rule in this way, and being slightly more restrictive. I think here are the real opportunities for simplification. They are not in, let's now also get rid, for example, of the interest limitation rule or significantly increase the percentage to EBITDA to which the interest limitation rule applies. I think here we're then confusing the goals of the exercise, which is on the one hand giving a handout to businesses or truly simplifying the rules.
Thanks for that, Jon. Christian, my question is just off of that, and it's about Pillar 2, because even some of the biggest defenders of the law mention that it's quite complicated. So my question is, as a practitioner, what has your experience been when it comes to how Pillar 2 has been enacted and how people are handling it or dealing with it, and where do you think there can be potential changes, and especially when it comes to how it interacts with the Anti-Tax Avoidance Directive, because that's where, as Johan mentioned, a lot of people see some overlaps.
Yes, okay. I think a lot of the discussion here and of Pillar 2 is can be reduced to finding an assessment base for tax rates, which is useful to focus on, especially when you're saying, okay, we are not competitive with the rest of the world. We have high tax rates. Of course, we have in some countries high tax rates, and others not. But if you lower your tax rate and you widen the assessment basis for the tax rates, you have no effect. And if you most of the complexity of the complexitation comes from finding the right assessment basis for the tax rate, defining the income, what can be deducted, what can not be deducted, where is the income, is it in Germany, is the income to be taxed in Germany, is it to be taxed in France, or, and as more easier this is, the more benefit you have for the people, because it's quite clear then how is the income defined, what can be deducted, what cannot be deducted, and we have, I can mostly speak for Germany, a very complex regulations for the assessment basis, and there's a lot of would be a lot of use to reduce this complexity, and I can imagine this would be useful for other countries too. And of course, this is at the end necessary to find a conclusion for the question: what kind of income is taxable in country 1 and country 2? Yeah, which is the problem of international taxation.
Maria Elena, I know that discussing Pillar 2 at the moment is a bit sensitive. My question is, at least from a simplification perspective, those are the overlaps that are a lot of people have mentioned in terms of simply just implementation and compliance. From that perspective, have you been looking at those overlaps that Johan, for example, mentioned when it comes to the CFC rule? And where are those discussions going? Is Pillar 2 part of that simplification process as well?
The two measures have completely different scopes. CFC and Pillar 2 are not the same. They have different target for what concerns the objectives and for what concerns the entities that are subject to them. So it's true that there are some aspects that overlap, or better, Pillar 2 considers CFC legislation already applied. So takes for granted that there is already a CFC legislation in place. At the moment, there are no immediate plans to act directly on Pillar 2, but this will be anyway analyzed in the future. We cannot do everything at once. So we are conscious that there are situations in which taxpayers pay a lot more than the minimum that is foreseen. And this is very clear with my colleagues, because I'm not directly responsible for that, but I know my colleagues will keep looking at any measure where the simplification can be taken forward. So Pillar 2 will probably be looked at, but not in the immediate time frame, no.
Michalis, you mentioned Pillar 2 as an object of discussion within the report as well. Can you tell us a little bit about where that discussion stems from and what the objective is?
We mentioned Pillar 2 in the report, is mentioned. Where we need to find a compromise is there is a suggestion that in the future we should see if everything is working and we need to do amendments. So some groups they agree on this, some other groups they disagree. My personal opinion is the fact that it is obvious for a new measure that is so, let's say, sometimes it's difficult to give him some time to work, some time, and then after that time you have to, like we do with everything in our lives, not only with taxations, whatever we do, even if it's medicine or even if it's whatever we do, we give them some time, 2 years, let's say 3 years, and then we consider what were our objectives, what were our targets, how we achieve them. Okay, if we achieve them, we leave it as it is. Do we have problems? Do we have loopholes? Can we prove it? So this is how I want to see it. But I'm one out of the 720. So I will discuss it with my colleagues and I will try to convince them. But my opinion is the fact that it's the right thing to do, like we do with everything. Like if it's something new and it's implemented recently, we have to give him some time. And if we need to make amendments, we have to make. We should not be afraid to do amendments if we have to improve a system, provided that the amendments we are doing is for the scope that the Pillar 2 was implemented, and we don't change the skeleton of Pillar 2.
Johan, same question.
Yes. Well, I don't think, if I'm allowed to speak beyond my own group and when I look at the room, that we disagree as such with the idea of assessing Pillar 2 at some point in the next couple of years, because indeed it is part of a normal legislative procedure that we assess laws once in place after a few years. I think what some political groups, including mine, are looking at is the geopolitical context of the report and the time in which we are writing this specific part of the report. I think for us, what we, and this is also our political group was actually quite annoyed as well with the Polish presidency note that has been leaked to the press. In my personal view, it should have never been written in the first place. Is that we need to first wait and see what the United States administration will do, and especially what will be included in the one big beautiful tax bill, as it's called. Once we know what the Americans will do with GILTI, we can assess what to do as Europeans. But now as Europeans are already starting to creating scenarios or creating speculations on what we should or should not do in response to the US administration, at least to my political group, seems inappropriate. And it also shows weakness towards the US administration. We should just stick firm to our regulatory framework, also beyond taxation. And of course, we assess the situation once the situation in the United States has crystallized more. But coming back to this is also because this is also the main reason why we are very sensitive to any language on Pillar 2 at this very moment, and that we just prefer to say to the Commission and to the Member States to just stick to what they agreed and stay firm, and not show any weakness or any sign of compromise towards the US administration. It is an international agreement of which they were part of, so we have no reasons to back down.
Christian, just referring to those negotiations, do you think they're an opportunity to reevaluate the law and how it's been implemented?
Well, this is a very difficult question. How it should be developing, as we heard from the last speakers, it's very difficult to see the development under the circumstances we have now, because from my perspective, even if you're saying we should not care too much about the US government, from my perspective, it's had a lot of influence on the views here, not from you personally, but from the political side, because of course every political system here in Europe, every country, and of course the European community have to react somehow to what's happening, and I can completely understand that this is completely very difficult to see how a thing is developing, which is going one day to the right way, next day to the left way, just as the statement of Donald Trump are in which is in any case not can be calculated how it will develop at the end. I can understand that there's a European goal for a minimum tax rate, which we have already accepted in Germany by our tax law. And this is maybe also a way for fighting the tax avoidance, because it does not have a competition. It does not. It enables the European countries to have competitiveness to lower tax rates. In other cases, we see, of course, that some European countries lower their tax rate for special purposes, like moving your household to some country. You then pay just a very low tax rate. I don't see that this is very useful on the whole, but it happens. And yeah, for that, I think it should be necessary from a European point of view to see how the US politics develop, but as you say, it's useful to stay on the path you have, and now have the perspective to what would you prefer, simplify or deregulate? Some between, of course, I understand. And this is, I think, really necessary because it's probably a burden to fulfill all the obligations the companies and also the private people have.
Thanks. We have some time for questions, so please. Elodie?
Hi, thank you. I'm Elodie Lamer with Tax Notes International. I have 3 quick questions for the Commission. There's a lot of call from some member states for some sort of panel or forum that would give some sort of binding interpretation to directive. We've heard that from Poland, from the Netherlands, from Germany. But at the same time, when given the opportunity to have such a forum for transfer pricing, member states refused political commitment. So I'm wondering what the Commission might be working on considering this request. And then you mentioned tobacco, and there was a call from 15, I think, finance ministers last week for a quick proposal. I was wondering if you had some sort of timeline. And in the same vein, the TaxSud commissioned a study on sugar taxes, which was published last week, and I was wondering if the study was quite positive in the EU directive on this, and I was wondering if you were considering next steps on this. Thank you.
I'll answer your first question because it refers to simplification. The other two don't. So we already have an institution that gives binding interpretation of tax law. That's the Court of Justice, and that's our primary forum for when we need. Sometimes the Commission loses in court, so it's not that the Commission has the most important knowledge on tax law. For what concerns this other initiative, well, we try to concentrate on initiatives that would have a chance to gather unanimity. And as you said, you answered yourself. The answer was in the question, let's say. It doesn't seem like such an initiative would easily gather unanimity. On the other two, we're working. That's all. Thanks.
Yes, good afternoon. My name is Andrea Rab. I'm the Vice President of the Hungarian Association of Tax Experts and also board member of ETAF. I would like to congratulate to the panel because this was very useful and it shows that there are a lot of talks needed still to find a solution and it's not easy. I would say some comments and I would have one question. My comments are the following, that I've been working in the tax administration for 10 years in Hungary, and I have the feeling that to scope tax avoidance, first you have to identify the loopholes, and in VAT especially to B2B, which you said that still needs for further solutions, so that's why my first comment. The second one, it's very important, legislation should be easy and also not time-consuming, because this is a very big problem for the businesses. The second one is that simplification process is very vital, not only internationally, but domestically. So internally, it's a very important one, and especially because of the competitive side. The third one is that simplification should be made from the point of view of businesses. So when we hear the principle of subsidiary, then we should hear the business's voice, what their problems are, and involve them. And here comes my questions, that how are the European Commission and the European Parliament intend concretely involve tax professionals in this decluttering exercise process. And especially in that part, I need to mention that in the legislative preparatory work, it would be highly important to show the cost side of this legislation which businesses face, and maybe to involve the professional organizations to involve them in be able to show the cost side of this. So actually the involvement of the tax professionals, and maybe to Ms. Scopio, this is a question, because I think this active participation can be a very useful solution as well. So, thank you.
You may have noticed that the Commission proposes, but the Council disposes. So our proposals tend to be a lot easier and simple than what comes out. I think that putting around the table 27 and coming with anything is already close to a miracle. However, the result is often very complicated. Also, we don't have to forget that a lot of complication comes from the implementation of that member states do of the European laws. It's not a secret that VAT, for instance, the obligations vary incredibly from one member state to the other. In one member state you have 3 lines, in another you have an encyclopedia as a tax return. So I'm sorry, you're knocking on the wrong door for your for a lot of your questions. For the rest, B2B, we didn't get there because of the member states. Definitive system was not a reality. We withdrew it now. And we will try to find another solution that could finally bring also that under the hat of the one-stop shop. But member states don't trust each other. So they prefer to keep that sphere of control under themselves. Every proposal of the Commission is subject to the better regulation rules, which implies that public consultations are open to anybody, including tax professionals. It's a pity that they don't participate, because they don't. So the first thing I would ask is to tax professionals to participate. And if we need to go directly and ask them, well, yes, we can do that. When we do that, for what concerns specific industries that are concerned, but tax professionals are working in every field. So I would say that if they have something important to say, they can just participate to the public consultations. Secondly, we have impact assessments, and those impact assessments are based on thorough study and input from the sector. And normally, the cost side is a very big part of any impact assessment, because otherwise there would be no assessment of the impact. That is the most important impact that we look at. So I think that there are surely 2 ways in which we could try together to make it all simple. First of all, you should lobby your own member states, because maybe you don't realize, but again, a big part of your complications don't stem from the original text. And you can lobby them while they are discussing in council, because sometimes positions are strange compared to what is the interest of the business or of the practitioners that are in their own territory. Politics is complicated. And secondly, now with this exercise, there is an alternative, an additional way to consult the business, because not only we consult now before, but then we will be consulting with the implementation dialogue at the highest level possible with the commissioner, but after that the legislation has been in place. So, moreover, for a lot of items, we have constant exchanges. We have the VAT expert group, the WEG, where we have business and member states together. And sometimes we ask the business, tell them if you have a problem, because we are just in the middle. We are here to facilitate. But then help us to help you. Thanks.
I think we have one last question, I think. There we go.
Hello, Anne Damiani from Agence Europe. I wanted to bounce back on what you said, Mrs. Copio, about implementation. Would there be a way for the Commission to design legislation so that implementation is not too different from one country to another? I'm thinking of the anti-money laundering revision from 2 years ago. That was one of the purpose to have a regulation instead of a directive, so that implementation would be much more harmonized. Is this something that you are thinking of? Thank you very much.
Thank you. We normally use the instrument of directive in taxation. Directives, by definition, leave a space for the member state to implement. We use regulations sometimes, but that's more in the customs area, because a border has to be the same border everywhere in Europe. That's why we use, and still there are some different application, because you sometimes have a different application even in the same state, especially if you have lender or regions. It can happen that you have different applications. What we have envisaged to do in the past, but we will probably try to reinforce, is to add to directives that are adopted some correspondence rules, like every article should be sent to the member states' authorities, who should come back with the way in which they have implemented it. That would make it easier for us to check whether implementation is correct, because sometimes it's not correct and good faith. Sometimes there is even an infringement that can come up from the the misapplication of certain rules, but also it can help the comparison among member states to see how they have applied the different rules. More than this, it's difficult. Otherwise, they wouldn't be directives. If there is a part which is left to the subsidiarity of the member states, they have all the rights to use it. And again, this is in the hands of themselves when they come to the final agreement.
I think that's all the time we have. I just want to thank this panel again for a very interesting chat, and I'll leave it to the next panel.
Hi, everyone. We will start this second panel. I don't know if you heard, but there was a lot of clapping in the other room, so I'm hoping for the same kind of energy here. Couple of scene-setting things from me before I introduce my panel. I don't know if you remember your first DAC. For me, it was DAC 3, 11 years ago, and we are DAC 10. I'm hoping to be there for DAC 25. But the fact that in 11 years we've got so many DACs presented means that a lot has happened. And there's a lot of interesting things going on that will probably influence the review of DAC and DAC 10. My understanding initially was that the Commission was reviewing DAC 1 to 6, but then recently you also mentioned DAC 7 as part of the review, so maybe we'll get into that. It's pretty clear that stakeholders, and I guess you guys, really hate DAC 6, so we might probably get into that as well. An interesting, really recent development also is linked to UNSHEL, which, as you know, dropped the economic substance test in favor of risk hallmarks. And last week, member states actually discussed, and it was quite consensual, to actually put the risk hallmarks of UNSHEL into DAC 6 in the review, DAC 10. Bit complicated to explain, so we'll probably get into that. And then one last thing that I wanted to flag is something that actually has come up in the 2 or 3 latest taxation annual taxation reports, is domestic tax secrecy. So the Commission said in its latest taxation report that while automatic exchange of information today provides tax authorities with abundant information about a capital income received in accounts abroad, In many member states, there's no automatic access to domestic bank data, and this hinders enforcement of taxation of capital income nationally and might facilitate underreporting. So I'm really curious to know if the Commission has something to do about this, and if something about this might come up in DAC 10. And then finally, there's, last week you were at the European Economic and Social Committee hearing, and Professor Philip Baker also mentioned taxpayer rights, and he said that it should feature in DAC 10 and mention specifically data protection, and I think it's an interesting topic as well. So to discuss all of these topics in the upcoming DAC 10, we have with us Henrik Polander, who's head of sector for administrative cooperation at DG TaxSud in the European Commission, who's probably going to suffer a bit today. We have Peter Bart, just next to me, who's policy analyst at the European Parliamentary Research Service. We have Philip van Klooster, who's a certified tax advisor, and I'm speaking a bit too fast, so I'm losing my breath, and member of the Institute for Tax Advisor and Accountants. We were supposed to have Angie Clocheret from the Belgian SPF Finance, but she apologized. She had a conflicting agenda issue, so she cannot attend today. But we'll do the most with our panel, which is still great. I'm going to give each panelist a few minutes to give introductory remarks. I wanted to actually, what did I want to start with? I wanted actually to hear first from the industry, and then from the Parliament, and then the Commission could answer in its introductory remarks. So we'll start with you, Philip.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for giving me the floor. So the DAX and Directive on Administrative Cooperation. Well, first of all, I think it was a good thing to have DAX in Europe because it is an instrument that really is needed in the EU, especially if we look that there are so many different systems and different tax systems in the EU, so that you need a certain exchange of information and help between the administrations to make it work. It also, for the profession, it's good to know that information that the administration has is circulated. It helps also to convince all taxpayers to pay the taxes they have to pay. So it helps that people don't say, okay, there are so many systems, we will avoid taxes. So I think as a basic, this is good. But in the beginning, it was non-automatic, the first DAC. So the countries had to ask for the information. So very soon it became automatic exchange of information. And you see it going on. First, it was between the administrations, the information that was available in the local administrations, which was exchanged to other countries. Now, they have found the way to ask information to the taxpayers, on the intermediaries, to get the information. So the burden to get information has shifted a little to, let's say, the industry, and then it is exchanged. So it all started slowly, but like you say, it's becoming a tsunami. And that is so more and more easy to get this tsunami when you always shift the burden to other people. And that's where we have to be cautious. Yeah? So also the Commission, I think, has to see that they don't want to shoot on everything, and because then the burdens will be bigger and bigger. So let's focus also. And like has been said in the first panel also, look what is the burden for the business, for the taxpayers, for the intermediaries in getting all the information and what is done with it. I think that is also a very important thing. And perhaps, well, if you want to evaluate certain rules, I think it's also important to take a helicopter view to see how you can simplify. And I agree, we will not always need deregulation, but simplification. And why your rule was first put in place. And to will not surprise, I will take the example of DAC 6. Yeah? So when you look to DAC 6, I think, was needed because we were at that moment in a time there was a lot of tax avoidance and everybody was in a certain agreement. It was becoming too much. yeah, or had been too much. So I also think that DAC 6 had really made a mentality change. It has had more or less its purpose because the tax avoidance is really shifted and decreased, as from my perspective. So, but also important, why did we had too much tax planning? When I started my career in '88, there was no tax planning nearly. You only had double tax treaties, and we don't had the issue of tax planning. But it was the moment that the EU wanted to increase the EU market, wanted to abolish all the taxes between the businesses doing business within the EU, and the member states wanted to attract companies. So that was the start of the tax planning business. Member states supported intermediaries and businesses to look to loopholes, to find ways to pay less taxes when they came in their country. And so, yeah, it became a business. But it was because there was literally, I would exaggerate, a demand of the member states to use them to locate businesses in certain countries. And I would even say, well, a certain Mr. Trump is still doing it again. Come to the US and you will pay less import taxes. It's the same story. So, but that is, I think, quite important. And then if you see there was too much tax avoidance, there were different reactions of the Commission. First of all, you had the ETAF directives, 1 and 2, which really made tax avoidance very difficult already, and for some things even impossible. But okay, we had then certain scandals where people did or wanted to react. We had, based on some, DAX 3 and DAX 5, but also at a certain moment, DAX 6. And for me, in first instance, DAX 6 was a mentality change that made clear, stop the tax avoidance to attract businesses. Yeah, so it was a change for intermediaries because, well, there was a lot of burden to report and to look to what is applicable and what not. But especially also, the member states, now they knew that they should not attract companies by tax planning because it had to be reported, it was not the way to attract. So they had to find other things. I think it's also the start of the subsidies in Europe, where they look to other systems. So DAX 6, first of all, is partly positive, but a lot of negative came with it. And that's the problem. It is much too complicated. Some basic principles are put in danger, like the legal privilege, and so on. And that is what we have to get rid of. So if we don't deregulate and abolish DAX 6, which I think will not happen, we certainly should look how can we keep the good things, but get rid of all the bad things. And that, I think, is a challenge we have to do. It's too complex, and that I think there are solutions to get it easier.
Thank you. Peter, can you give us the Parliament's perspective?
Yes. Hello? Okay, sorry. Thank you very much, Elodie, and thank you, of course, also to the ETAF for the kind invitation. Just for context, I work for the European Parliamentary Research Service, which is a service inside the Parliament that provides support to MEPs and their staff. We're a neutral think tank, non-partisan, but we follow, of course, the EU policy work very closely. And I wanted to use a bit this introduction to talk a bit about the Parliament's perspective on the DAC, because I had a look at the voting records of all the DACs we had over the past couple of years, and of course, important caveat, the Parliament only adopts opinions on the DAC. It's not a co-legislator in the field of taxation. But what is remarkable is that you see in the Parliament very, very widespread and almost unanimous support for the DAC.
when you look at the number of votes cast against a certain DAC, I'd written it down, it was about 30 votes for DAC 6, 60 votes for DAC 7 and 8. In a parliament of 700 and plus members, that is not the normal way of procedure. It's certainly not the normal way of procedure in the area of taxation. That does show that amongst MEPs and political groups, that even among groups who are more, or individual MEPs who are more critical or hesitant about the EU's role in the domain of taxation, there is at least a recognition that member states should work together, that at least there should be some form of administrative cooperation. Members may have different views on tax competition or whether there's a need for a common European corporate tax base, but there is the near unanimous recognition that taxpayers, whether they are individuals or companies, should not have a tax advantage because of a lack of communication between member states. That is a bit the past. So the Parliament underwrites the importance of the DAC. It does acknowledge that it plays a key role. Now, what about the future? Simplification, decluttering, however we want to call it. Parliament has already been a bit ahead of the curve there. Already in 2021, there was already a report from the Parliament dedicated to the DAC, where it laid out some of its concerns, which the Commission also partly addressed through DAC 8, where the Parliament said, look, what we want to focus on is closing certain gaps in implementation. It mentioned, for example, non-custodial dividend income, which then was taken up in DAC 8. We want more use of the TINs, the tax identification number, which DAC 8 also sort of addressed. But there was also recognition that DAC 6, which I'm sure will be mentioned quite a few times today, that we need more guidelines on this. This needs to be simpler. We can't burden SMEs with this. So there is already a recognition in Parliament, yes, the DAC is an important tool, it is a key tool, but it can benefit perhaps of some optimization. How can we make this work better? And I think it's in that spirit that the Parliament will now await any potential revision of the DAC. As we've heard in the first panel, Mr. Hadjipantella's report will maybe also cover the DAC. His report is much broader and will perhaps also comment more on more recent DACs, the 6, 7, 8 and 9. And we will need to see, but I think the Parliament is eagerly awaiting the outcome of the Commission's evaluation of the DAC.
Thank you. And now the floor to the Commission.
Thank you. So, thank you very much. First for the invitation and for organizing this, and also with the focus on the DAC. As people have mentioned, we are looking into, well, all of the tax area, but DAC in particular has received a lot of attention from our side as well. So this is extremely timely to have a discussion here, and it is important for us to hear from all of you that are here. Now, I was asked to prepare a little presentation, so I did, but it's a bit basic, so we can go through it quite quickly, I think, but it's just to illustrate what we are doing. So maybe go to the first slide. Looking at the state of play, so as I think was already mentioned, we are working on two tracks, let's say. So one is the DAC, which is a standalone part, let's say, and another one is the other areas of direct taxation. And let's not forget, as my colleague Maria Elena said, also working on indirect taxes, but that's not my specialty, so I won't mention that. So there are two tracks, and the idea, well, that's to continue on those two tracks, so present an omnibus proposal covering everything except the DAC, then have a DAC 10 for the rest. But let's not forget that there are other things than legislation. We have fiscalis groups where you can work out different guidelines, and we also have implementing acts where you qualify parts of the directive further. So there will be other means than the directive as such. let's see. Yes, so the main objectives. I wanted to highlight something here, which I think was several times mentioned, that the main objective is to simplify for business, for private actors. But in fact, we need also to think about the tax administration. So the objective is twofold. We need to look at tax administrations to simplify, and we need to look at business. So we need to simplify procedures. We need to look at where there is a double employment or something, and we also need to clarify potential unclear issues. One thing we also need to focus on is the availability of information on what is done and how things are used, and the outcome of all of this work on the DAC. Here, the directive as it now stands doesn't leave much scope actually for looking into those issues. So there is work in groups among member states and the Commission to try to see what we can do to have a more systematic approach to looking at what the outcomes are. However, this is not part of the legislation, and therefore it's not compulsory. And from the Commission side, we do think that it would make sense to have more publicity on the use. We will also look at other aspects, so clarifications and improvements of the directive. And you mentioned DAC 7, for instance. So just to say that the current evaluation of the DAC actually covers DACs 1 to 6. So in the evaluation report, these are the directives that will be mainly covered. However, I think we will mention some aspects of DAC 7 because we now have 2 years of reporting and exchanges, and this then merits some attention, although it's a bit too early maybe for some things. Overall, in DAC 10, we are free to look at other directives than 1 to 6. So in case there are things that turn out to need improvement or clarifications on 7 and 8, we could also do that if that is indeed needed.
Already 8 as well?
Well, in case we have identified aspects in the implementation by member states, for instance, where it could be clarified, this could be done if we think it necessary. But that's I mean, just to be clear, we're quite an early stage yet. We are sort of starting the design. We haven't got the evaluation ready yet, so since that is not agreed at the highest level yet, it's difficult to decide on which areas to go for. So just, the third slide was just to show to you that we are, and to prove that I was right in being glad to be here and listen to what you have to say, that we are doing quite significant consultations. So we're not only doing consultations of all relevant actors in the context of the evaluation. We have a study where a great number of stakeholders were interviewed. And then we have the consultations in the context of the general simplification exercise, where they have now been in contact with all member states, and they have an ongoing exercise to contact, I don't know, I think, was it 70 or 90 different stakeholders, so quite a lot. They are working, I wouldn't say day and night, but they're working a lot to have this finished as soon as possible. We'll also have targeted meetings with member states and with stakeholders to look at various aspects. So you can say, well, for DAC 1, for instance, well, maybe only member states are relevant for a targeted consultation. For DAC 7, on the other hand, you would need member states as well as platform operators, for instance. So this is something we are going to do in the future. We also have the platform meetings. Many of you are aware of those. I think they're a good platform for discussing issues. And the DAC evaluation was there in December, and I understand that we will discuss it at the next meeting again if we think that we have enough material to base the discussion on. So that said, then we put a lot of emphasis and value on the consultation, and maybe follow up on what Maria Elena said, that we can sometimes be a bit disappointed on the limited number of contributions we get for public consultations, and and other similar calls for evidence. So for what we launched for the DAC evaluation, for instance, was quite disappointing, to be honest. And without this, of course, we have less to base our analysis on. So here, just for you, it's worthwhile to have a contribution for our public consultations, because they are taken up, they are published, and they will then need to be integrated in the evaluation, in the impact assessment, and so on and so forth. Wanted to just react to 2 points, I guess. A limitation which is quite important for us is the fact that a lot of the DACs are based on OECD agreements. So if you want to change, let's say, DAC 4, well, you have already an agreement within the OECD on country-by-country reporting. So if you want to change it, well, first of all, member states probably won't agree to it, and second, I'm not sure it would be good for business either to have separate rules on the international level and EU level. So, and you know, DAC 2, 3, 4, part of 6, the whole of 7 and 8 are based on the OECD. So you can see the scope here is relatively limited. There are tweaks we can do. There's also the possibility to take some of the discussion that we may want to have to the OECD, which we can do and we do when the occasion arises. So that's an aspect to take into consideration. Yes, I think that's all for now. Thank you.
Since you mentioned DAC 4, I was wondering, because after we adopted DAC 4, we adopted a public country-by-country reporting, and it's not a TaxSud text, so I was wondering how it fit into your assessment of DAC 4, because it's double reporting, no? So.
Thank you. That's a very relevant question. So the public country-by-country reporting is separate from the country-by-country reporting, and it is public, whereas the other one is not. We need to analyze this together with the colleagues in charge of the public country-by-country reporting. So, of course, this is not, as you said, pure TaxSud responsibility. We are looking into that, but as you can understand, it's complex because a change of DAC 4 may not necessarily sort of repair if there is something needs repairing. So we would need to look at where we could do something. I think also needs to be taken into account that the DAC 4 has a different objective than the public by country report. So if you look at DAC 4, well, it's a reporting that is intended for tax administrations to be able to do a risk assessment, a high-level risk assessment, whereas public country-by-country reporting is not really very useful for that. So I think that the room for improvement there is probably relatively limited, but that said, we will look into it.
I'm saying that because I remember from answers to the public consultation that it struck me that actually stakeholders seem to prefer the public country-by-country reporting to DAC 4. I think that's something that came up in the public consultation. But to dive a bit deeper into DAC 6, there was a lot of reference to Marie Kondo in the first panel, and I'm not really familiar with her works except through Gilmore Girls. But I think her principle is that you have to get rid of what doesn't make you happy. And so I'm wondering, and I'm talking to you first, Philippe, which hallmark in DAC 6 makes you happy and which doesn't make you happy?
Well, that's a very detailed question. But I think what on DAC 6 makes me really not happy is that sometimes it's more severe in relation to a legal arrangement than illegal arrangements. I give you the example. I'm a tax advisor in Belgium. So a member of the Belgium Institute, I have rules to follow and I have legal privilege. If you, for example, hypothetical, you're a criminal you have done a VAT carousel, a lot of money you have gained, and you make an arrangement to put that money in buildings. You come to me and you ask, well, what do you think about it, what I'm going to do? I look at the legal situation and I say, legally, very bad, you're doing money laundering, you should not do that, so stop it, and probably you need a lawyer to defend your rights and see how you can regulate. Full stop. I have no reporting obligation based on the AML legislation because I'm looking to the legal position of my client. Now, second, you are a successful entrepreneur, you're doing, you want to boost your business, you're going international, and you do an international arrangement, and you set up a structure, and before you do it, you come to me and you say, what do you think about that situation? I made the legal analysis, and now I should report you. Very bizarre. If you're doing criminal things, you're protected. When you're doing legal things, I have a report obligation. So I don't say we have abolished, but that's some principles we have to think. Is it logic that as client, taxpayer, you have less legal rights when you come for legal advice at the tax administration? Not a lawyer, but I have the Belgian rules, than in the other situation. That was one of the elements of the case. So we still have the other rules which could say, okay, I have to report to another intermediary who has no legal professional, or the client himself, who then has to report. And I think the basic element where I said there is a mentality change is there is at the end somewhere reporting. It's not important that it's not done by an intermediary, especially not for the bigger companies or the client, because the mentality change was one of the countries, and secondly, that the multinationals want to keep control. They don't want that if they do aggressive tax planning, that is reported. So it's true that intermediaries play a role and have worked on certain structures, but the rights of confidentiality sometimes still should be respected. And then, okay, you have to look to other ways how to fulfill the ultimate goal. And that, I think, is one of the elements which should be looked at, is that it is, as the legal protection is again restored, trust in society must remain. Especially, we are talking about legal structures. And we can still report in basic elements. Second element, if you look to the DAX 6, and you look to the court case, and you see the discussion which was in the orals between the Commission and the court, the Advocate General. So the idea of the Commission is, if you think about a fantastic structure to avoid taxes, but it's totally hypothetical, and the client says, well, I'm not going to do that, the Commission says, you have to report. We want to know everything. The European Court says no, clearly in its decision, and in its motivation, not in the decision. Well, this is not what should be. Only when you have the basics of the start of the implementation, there is a reporting obligation. So there is a conflict between the Commission and the European Court. The European Court makes DAX 6 simpler in the reasoning, which I haven't seen yet taken positions by the Commission and by the tax authorities. So one of the first elements I would like to the Commission, look where the Court of Justice, European Court of Justice, looks and says, well, it should not be so complicated, only this, only this. And then I think we are already a first step in simplifying DAX 6. Because in the beginning, with DAX 6, it was really a purpose to be vague, to get everybody afraid, and to try to get everything. And I think we have to get focus on what do we really need. I think that's an important element.
Yeah, but I fell into a rabbit hole yesterday reading on DAX 6, and actually I found a court case that I completely overlooked last year, where the court actually says that DAX 6 being vague is not a problem, and problem is quoting here because it's more detailed than that. So how...
The court says DAC 6 is not vague, but it's not vague for the court and the Advocate General because they take simplifications in the reasoning. They already somewhere make reference, for example, to the Belgium state where they say, well, DAC 6 should only be applicable for those intermediaries who are specialized and doing international advice. Well, if this is true, then it's fine. All intermediaries and who are only doing local work are not convinced or not concerned with DAC 6. But then you can write this also. So the Advocate General, because during the orals, there were really questions of the Advocate General saying, is it not complicated? Is it not too vague? And so on. But when you see the conclusion of the Advocate General, it is clearly where he takes shortcuts. And then by the shortcuts, you say, well, this is not difficult if you look like this. This should be like this. It should only be at the beginning of implementation, not when it's hypothetical. This was positions which were not taken by the Commission in the part and not by the local administrations. So I understand partly the conclusion of the Advocate General when you follow his reasoning, but that's not what I'm seeing in practice.
Okay. Before I give the opportunity to the Commission to answer, Peter, in your opinion, how can these hallmarks be tweaked to be made more efficient, better, stronger, faster?
Well, I think it's important, indeed, just to repeat again. Indeed, there's been a lot of concern about DAC 6 that some definitions lacking in the directive, including what is an arrangement, what is a tax advantage. Some of the hallmarks are broadly defined, but indeed it should be recognized that this, in my opinion, and I'm happy to stand corrected, this is not an accidental flaw in the proposal. It was a feature. It was always the idea. Let's make sure that we have these emerging risks, and particularly the things that may not necessarily fall within the definition of the general anti-avoidance rule within the ETAF. So it was always about let's go wider than this, and of course that is a political choice, and I'm not involved in that, so I will not speak about that. But I think that is why any exercise regarding DAC 6, regarding simplification on DAC 6, I think it will get difficult very quickly, because you will be quickly getting into the heart, into the objective of that proposal and what it was trying to do. And of course, it is a political decision to say, okay, let's broaden it, or let's be more strict or less strict. That is fine. That is, but I'm just saying it's not very low-hanging fruit with DAC 6. You immediately get into the core business of it. How the hallmarks should be tweaked. I don't have a particular comment on that. I think, what should be added, and therefore it's a shame that Ms. Clocheret could not be here. It's clear that from the intermediary's perspective, there is a concern about the reporting of DAC 6. The question is, how do tax authorities see it? Not member states as such, but the tax authorities. How do they see this reporting? Because there have been some indications, questions that DAC 6 may have led to over-reporting, and that the tax authorities perhaps cannot judge the quality of the reporting, or that they may miss out on some genuine, real problematic issues just because of the overload on reporting that they get. So that is why it's important that we also get the tax authorities' views on this in DAC 6 to see, okay, how do they see it? Do they see the same problem? And then we need to come together to a solution, but we need to await the Commission's evaluation on this.
You want to add something?
Perhaps you could put a floor to certain DACs, minimum amounts. That could be already something.
Thank you. Just to frame the question, I actually didn't know that when the UK left the EU, they actually got rid of a lot of hallmarks from DAC 6. So they only kept the D, I think. And I was wondering if in your assessment, if the UK, for example, is an inspiration for you, and if you find out that some hallmarks are actually not effective, not reported, or that is there some hallmarks that you've identified as maybe not useful?
Thank you. So many questions. So when we look at DAC 6, it's complex, as you all can hear. There are comments ranging from take everything away and to touch nothing. Overall, member states are quite positive, although they do agree that there are a number of hallmarks and other aspects that could be clarified. We understand from business that there is also a lot that is considered not to be very clear. We are looking at it quite an open way, and we're listening to what's being said. We're open to clarifying text. We're open to taking away hallmarks. We're open to, well, we're not only open to, I think we're quite committed to looking at how we can provide guidelines. So non-binding guidelines. We talked about binding guidelines before, but this would be non-binding guidelines because it's not for us to do. So these are things that we can do. It's difficult to analyze the hallmarks. We have statistics on which ones are being most used and which ones are being least used. And how do you interpret that? If a hallmark is not being used, does that mean that actually people are not doing these things anymore because DAC 6 is there? So, you know, it has had an effect. Or does it mean that this is, you know, it's not relevant? And if we have a lot, is that over-reporting, or is it that it's not relevant, or what is that? So the statistics don't really help. You can't say, well, there are, you know, 12,000 reports on this hallmark. It's got to be too much, or this must be important. What conclusion can you draw from that? And this is why a more substantial contact and analysis is important. And this is what we're trying to do. So we are looking at hallmarks that we have heard repeatedly are not assessed as being useful. But
which one? Which ones are the ones that? Can you say?
I think it's no. Yeah. Okay. That's too early to say. Let's just say that we realize that what we are being told, that some hallmarks are not useful, and we are listening to that. It's too early. I mean, I'm not, because it's not only evaluation, it's also the DAC 10 proposal, and I can't go into that at this time. What we do also see is that there is another element to this, and this is when member states receive the information, they may actually be interested, but it may not have the right quality. So on that aspect, there could also be tweaks to the directive to see, can we standardize information in a way that we can ensure that it's relevant. For instance, that could be done. So that there are things you can do also to ensure that it's being done in a way that it can be useful. Just another thing that I just relate to what's been said earlier on. Why do we have DAC 6? Well, the purposes are quite, I mean, varied. I mean, you referred to preventing harmful tax competition, for instance. But there's also the member states clearly wanted to be aware of what's going on because they might not be aware of that. And whether it's illegal or not, they may still want to put a brake on something. So DAC 6 provides them with a good picture of what is going on, or at least that's the intention. So what's going on, and is it necessary for us to do something about this? So that's quite a sort of, it's another perspective. Then, of course, they also have the very direct use. They use it for risk assessments of a more general nature, maybe, and they use it for audits of different types, so more general ones and more specific ones. So there's quite a wide range of use for this, and this perhaps clarifies why member states think it's a very useful instrument. Now, I want to again mention that we see that member states use this information, and we think that it's important that this should be visible. So this is something we need to work on.
I would like to. You have something?
May I?
Sure. Quickly, because time is really.
Two or three questions. First of all, it would be interesting to see why the member states thinks it's interesting. If the reasoning why they think it's interesting, if it's published later on, so that there's more insight to see where it helps. Because then we also can say, okay, this can be simplified and you still have your result. First of all. Secondly, I was surprised, in principle, everything what is reported under DAC 6 is legal, because if it's illegal, you don't do it. So then it's a wrong advice, I would say, because it should be legal. And thirdly, well, the less reports, in principle, the better, because then you don't have tax avoidance. Difficult one, but in reality, we should have no reports.
Fipa, I'd like to stay with you for this question. I mean, the idea of putting the economic substance hallmark of Shell into DAC 6, is there any opinion that you can share at the moment on this?
Well, my first reaction is that I would not be positive, because it's two different things. On-shell, in principle, is an anti-avoidance element. So it's more an ETAF rule, where you really make rules that something is not, it becomes taxable. While DAC 6, in principle, is a reporting of what is legally just done for information. So for me, from a basic, two different rules who can't combine without changing one of both, fundamentally. Because the one is an anti-avoidance and the other one is just an information. So they don't go together for me.
To the Commission, so last week or the week before, you kind of got some sort of informal green light from member states to go with that approach. So I guess now the ball is in the Commission's court. There is a hallmark in DAC 6 that touches upon economic substance, is D2, but it's quite narrow because it's linked to beneficial ownership transparency. So I was wondering, I'm guessing you were disappointed because the Commission wanted on-shell and thinks on-shell has added value. So I'm wondering if, I mean, it's probably early stages, but is there anything you can say about how this could fit into DAC 6? Could it be a new, broader hallmark, or is there anything you can share? Please.
Thank you. Well, I was not at the meeting where this was discussed in Council. The information I received was that discussion was not that clear. So from Commission side, we still need to analyze this further. As you said, I mean, on-shell is Commission proposal. We think it's a good proposal. So we need to analyze further whether ideas that member states are discussing is something that we would like to follow up on. For the time being, I mean, that's where we are. We still haven't carried that analysis any further. It would be...
But even in DAC 6, I guess, defining economic substance was not a given, because it's quite broad, the way economic substance is defined in DAC 6. And I remember in the negotiation of on-shell, there was like, oh, the manager has to be living in a distance that allow daily commuting, and some people were saying, but now we are more and more digital companies, or remote work. So agreeing on economic substance and on specific criteria to define economic substance will still be hard, right? It's an easy question, I guess.
Well, yes, I mean, I can agree that that would be hard. I think for the time being, we're not at that stage yet. There's been a first discussion in Council. We're not really there. If we would consider it for the DAC 10, well, that's we have some time still to listen to member states again and consider whether this is a workable solution or not. So for the time being, I think we need to listen to see what is feasible, because as I said, we don't see discussions so far as being that clear. So finding a solution would need a lot of reflection from our side. So it's a bit too early to say yes or no. But that said, of course, we are looking at it. I mean, you can understand that, and we want to get something out of Unshell, obviously.
I want to go really quickly into legal privilege, and tell me if I'm dumb and I didn't really understand the court cases. But if I'm a taxer, I want to avoid taxes in Belgium, and I don't want it to be reported to the tax administration, I can easily go to a lawyer and not go to the tax advisor, right? Is this the current situation after court cases?
Well, at least there are lawyers who make now publicity, come to us, and we don't have to report. In principle, if you look to the system of DAC 6, that should not be a solution, because for me, and that I think they have to make clearer if their revision, that the lawyer still has to report to his client that it is a reportable transaction. And then it becomes the client. So the court, the only thing that the court said in its decision is the lawyers have not to make any reference to other intermediaries. Yeah? So the directive nor the local legislation can ask to lawyers if they see a reportable transaction where they have legal privilege, that they give that information to another intermediary. That is forbidden, because his identity must be kept secret. But he still, for me, as I understand correctly, should report to his client, who has then the obligation. And that's why I'm saying, and that is still, and I hope that the directive will make it correctly, that for the tax advisor, for example, in Belgium, where I also have legal privilege, but I'm not a lawyer. Tomorrow I can be a lawyer, but I'm not a lawyer. I'm the Belgium Institute. Well, there, when I have legal privilege, so I should not report also myself. But if I have an other intermediary where I'm connected with it, then I should transform it to him, and he can report. If there is not, I also have to go to the client. So for me, there is no big difference. But the problem is, lawyers now make the publicity, come to us, and there is no reporting. For me, that's wrong.
And so, is there anything, I think your colleague Carl Cronenberg said recently that this might be addressed in DAC 10, some kind of fix, but I didn't really get what kind of fix we need, and yeah, maybe we can start with you and then the Commission.
Well, for me, the fix is very easy. Just say in the directive that a lawyer never has to report to other intermediaries if there is a reportable. He only has to report to his client that it is a reportable intermediary. And then, for me, the court case is more or less fixed. And the court says this should be everywhere in Europe, so that they focus on the rights of the lawyers, which I think is correct. And that's why I'm saying the legal privilege should be more recognized. If a country gives it, fine. The only thing, it may fall back to the company. Well, but there's still the reporting, and the mentality change is still there. So there is no big problem if the fundamental rights are respected.
So is the Commission expected to do something in DAC 10, and what kind of fix?
So with the DAC 8, which came just after the first decision, we made the change which was referred to here. I'm not sure, actually. I didn't have the time to catch Carl to see what he was referring to. But what I do know, and this is, I think, a general issue with the DAC, and especially with DAC 6, is that there are different implementations of the directive across the European Union. And in relation to this particular issue, so the legal professional privilege, this has received different interpretations in different member states. And this, of course, is not very good. And this is something that we are looking into. Now, whether this is something that would be suitable in DAC 10, or if there are other ways of dealing with this, I don't know. But I think for sure, from a Commission perspective, we, of course, want the interpretation to be as close as possible between member states. So this is an important point for us.
One element I would add, in principle, it's logic that it's in different countries different, because the profession of tax advisors is different in different countries. In some countries, they have legal privilege, in others not. In sometimes they have certain deontology to follow, in others not. So, because a lot of lawyers doing just the same business and never go to court, just competition with tax lawyers in Belgium. So you have wrong competition then, because they have a title doing just the same, they should not report and we should report. So the Commission says, well, if it's not the same in every country, people will go to other countries. But now you have differences within the countries. That's not logic either. So for me, the fundamental of DAC 6 is the authority should know what happens. That's still the case. So why change fundamental rights if the purpose is still there? That should not be forgotten.
I'm going to turn to DAC 10 and the things I mentioned earlier about domestic bank secrecy. I know it's an issue particularly in Belgium. I was wondering if the fact that you have, like in Belgium, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but if you have to have some sort of suspicion of abuse for the tax administration to access information on your bank account, whereas if you have a foreign account, you get the information automatically. And I remember this Italian resident in Belgium who has an account in Luxembourg actually filing a petition with the Petit Committee in the European Parliament. And I think that I've read in the infringement proceeding report that he actually filed a complaint with the Commission. So do you see this as an issue for DAC 10 or for DAC as a whole? Maybe not DAC 10, but DAC as a whole. Do you see it as a DAC issue since it's a domestic?
Thank you. It's an interesting question, and I think maybe we can step back and look at the development of the DAC, and you can see that the last two, well, no, not the last two, but 7 and 8, they actually apply even for domestic exchanges. So, and this is essentially to ensure a level playing field and to ensure also that there is no, forum shopping or similar activities. Now, so that's the general trend, I think, in the DAC. Now, of course, as I said earlier, some of these directives are actually based on OECD legislation. That makes things a bit more complicated. But we are looking into this because we did see the petition, and we see that this may be an issue, and that this is something that we need to look into, for the reasons why we have enlarged the scope of DAC 7 and DAC 8 to ensure a level playing field. So we will look at this. Whether it will end up in DAC 10 or not, that remains to be seen. But, well, this is a fact. I mean, this is how it is. As we see it, of course, now, member states, it's not that they cannot get this information. They can. So that's not the thing. The thing is, it's not automatically transferred to the tax authority, so that's the difference. So whether this, I mean, the relevance of this difference, of course, we need to have a look, and we need to see what we can do. But it is something we have on our table, and we are looking at. So.
Have you made an assessment already as to whether or not it's hampering the good functioning of DAC 2? Because you cannot cross-check information, for example?
I think this is what we need to look at, whether it is hampering or not, and this is then what we would have an impact assessment or other instruments for, to say, you know, if we do this, what effect does it have, and so on. So that's better regulation is all there to check whether. So the analysis is still to be made, but as I said, let's see. the risk when we get a new DAC, and it was the same for DAC 8, not DAC 9, is that everybody wants to have something in it. Yeah? And we talked earlier about the Parliament, the European Parliament wanted a lot of things in DAC 8, and I think we did a lot of things, but we didn't do all of it. And other people also asked for more things. And in the end, you need to make some choices, and we'll see which choices we make this time for DAC 10. We will try to include the things that are most relevant. And the emphasis right now is on simplification. Let's be clear about that. Simplification is the lead word sort of for the timing.
Philippe, what do you think of touching domestic bank secrecy in Belgium? I guess this would be a big issue.
Well, it's nothing to make with taxes. It's a principle we have in Belgium. The secrecy is not so fundamental anymore than it was years ago. Now, if there is a need for the information, the tax authorities have the information. There is already the central register of all the bank accounts that you have. So there is still the element, do we really want Big Brother seeing everything? Yeah? And should the administration have everything? I think there is also a danger on it. I'm now for the moment in discussion with the Belgian tax authorities because of the information exchange, and sometimes you get wrong documents. Well, they change documents on their system without any sign. For me, this is also not acceptable. So everybody should pay taxes, should not avoid the taxes, but also be careful to give all the powers of the world to the tax authorities. Be careful about that.
Peter, on the need for more transparency, maybe real estate, maybe you will also say something about this. So real estate, European TIN number, I don't know, what's the perspective of the Parliament on this?
So it is true that at the OECD there have been some initiatives to perhaps look at the exchange of information regarding real estate and how that may, to have information on real estate transactions for tax purposes. I think what we should remember there is that EU member states already do exchange some information on this, the ownership of property, income relating to property, rental income from platform operators in DAC 7. So we're already gathering a lot of information on that. Whether that needs to be more global at OECD level, that can be discussed, of course. Another idea is indeed this idea of a European TIN, the European Tax Identification Number. In an ideal world, yes, we would have this. Whether we need one now, and let me underline that this is my personal view, I do think that, and it has already been mentioned in the first panel, the fact that we are seeing such huge progress in member states with the matching of information. It is true that 10 years ago, in the early days of DAC 1, there were indeed problems of matching, and indeed only a few member states could deliver a good record or a near perfect record on this. Nowadays, the TINs are being more used. They are. We have the algorithms that are being used. These algorithms. The beauty about algorithms is that they get better over time. They have a learning curve built into them. Through DAC 8, we will also have a better use of the TINs from 2028 and 2030 onwards in certain areas. So a European TIN may perhaps now. As I said, I think a European TIN is a good idea, but it will require a lot of political negotiations, a lot of technical resources for perhaps something that now technology may have already solved to a great extent. But of course, look forward to the Commission's evaluation on this if I happen to be wrong on this.
Henrik, I would like to give you the final words, maybe on these two issues, a European TIN, and I guess real estate, we would first wait for the OECD to come up with their own proposal, but European TIN, is this something we might expect for DAC 10, and on real estate, where do we stand?
Thank you. Two very relevant questions. Maybe first, the real estate. I think the interest in the OECD for real estate is the link to high net worth individuals and taxation. So it's very much à la mode for the time being to look at these things. We have been in very close contact with the OECD, and they have basically started with what we already do in the EU. Then they have added some extra to this. It's not yet sure whether we will need to make any changes to the DAC based on the changes made or the new exchanges within the OECD. There may just be a need for changes to the forms that are being used and so on. We don't know yet, so we haven't. But okay, there will be some additions to what we do. There's also in parallel some work going on between member states where they try to ensure that we exchange better quality information on real estate, and where we make sure that all the information that we want and that is available actually also gets exchanged. It sounds complicated because it is, because all the member states have different systems for registration of real estate. So obviously it varies a lot. But there are at least then two work streams. If they need to make it into DAC 10, we don't really know yet. Maybe it's sufficient to just change, like I said, the forms, the schema that are used for the exchange. For the TIN, yes, I mean we have now the matching rates are significantly higher, but they're not as high, still not as high as we think they should be. And the TIN is an important instrument here because that is, I mean, if you have the right TIN, you can be sure to get the match. If you don't, you need to resort to other methods. We did a study some years ago now, 8 years ago, I think, on an EU TIN. And the outcome was that it would be very costly to launch an EU TIN. So that was left aside. And instead, we have a verification mechanism on the web, which is not perfect, but it's there. Now, we have recently launched a study to look at the TIN. There are two parts of it. One is, could we have maybe not an EU TIN, but some sort of common element that would make it easier to do the matching? So we'll have a look at that. And the other element is a verification tool. So a true verification tool, not just a tool, it's what we have now, which says, yes, this is a TIN from Germany. No, one where you can say, is this Henrik's TIN? Yes, it is. This type of thing. So those are the two things we are looking at, and I think they're very close to the current ambition that we have, that is ensure the quality of the information so that it can be used. And then the next step, of course, is the use of the information. So these are really core elements of the DAC work. No.
Go ahead.
In your opening, you said, Philip Baker said in DAC 10, you should have the rights of the taxpayer.
Yeah.
Wonder if this is something which the Commission is looking at to put in DAC 10, because we give more power and more information to the administrations, which is good on such, for compliance and so on. But sometimes you see also misuse of information by tax authorities. Is there also a focus on the taxpayers' rights in the future by the Commission?
Yes. Sorry. Go ahead.
So we have done work in the past on taxpayers' rights, which has not made it into directives, but in soft law. I'm not sure that this is suitable for the DAC, but I don't really have any concrete image of what it could be.
When Philip Baker talked about it, it was a lot about data protection as well and privacy.
Yes, so Philip Baker, he talks a lot about that, but in the end, this is, as I see it, as I think TaxSud sees it, it's not a DAC issue, because the DAC is, every time we launch something, it's consulted and approved by the EDPS. So if we would do something that is not in line with the GDPR, they would stop it. And we sometimes have made changes and say, okay, we need to change the formulation. So for the DAC, I don't see this issue.
Okay. So if I understand properly, I'm sorry, but we don't have time for audience questions. I'm sorry. Thank you very much to my panelists. It was really interesting, and I'm giving the floor back to Philippe Parraou. You can applaud them. On reste là.
Time schedule, but keep your questions to the speakers for the reception we have afterwards. It will be a better place for doing it. So it's time to conclude this conference, and I would like to thank all of you for being part of this important discussion. Thank you for being with us, and a special thank to our speakers. Your insights helped us very much in better understanding both the challenges and the opportunities in simplifying the EU tax system. You've given us a lot to think about, so many thanks for that. You reminded us that simplification is not just a technical exercise, but a political and economic imperative, one that demands balance, foresight, and dialogue. The road ahead is not easy, but if there is one message that has come through clearly today, it is this one. We need a tax system that works not just in theory, but in practice for businesses, for tax professionals, and for member states alike. To our moderators, thank you for guiding, many thanks, Elodie, guiding today's panel, raising important questions and keeping the conversation focused and engaging. And to everyone in the audience, thank for your attention and your interest. Your participation across Europe is what makes this event truly meaningful. And thanks to the one who are connected online, the more than 2,000 people connected. Thank you, all of you. Before we say goodbye, but that is only for the ones who are in the room, I'm happy to invite to a small reception just outside the conference room, and it's a chance to continue the conversation in a more informal setting. So thank you once again, and I hope to see you to our next ETAF event. Thank you. Bye-bye.